yeah, thank you everyone for joining this Innovator Stories. And this is a series of webinars where we try to speak to founders. But I think before we start, I'm going to just kind of briefly introduce myself. So my name is Munya Shoshi. I'm based in Cape Town, and I'm new to ISAC. So I recently joined the leadership development program as an international innovator. And of course, one of the things that the kind of international innovators uh, uh, committee tries to do is really host a number of series throughout the year where we speak to people who are doing very interesting things. And today we're speaking to Jeremy Lee, who is the CEO and co-founder of a company called Cision Vision. And in a few minutes, I'm going to let kind of Jeremy speak a little bit about kind of what Cision Vision does. But essentially, the way that this format works is that I'm hoping that it's more of a coffee chat with a founder. I think for me, one of the things that I was really excited about when I joined the International Innovators Committee was really this ability to speak to people who have started companies, because that is something that I'm interested in doing. I'm sure a number of you who've joined are also interested in doing that. So I see these as kind of informal chats, really to get into some of the challenges, lessons, and things that we can kind of anticipate on a journey. So I think with that, I think I'm going to just give Jeremy kind of the floor here to kind of tell us a little bit about what Cision Vision does, and the technologies that they're developing, and then potentially start getting into some of the story and your history.
Hi, Munya. Yeah, hi everybody. Thank you very much for this opportunity. I'm very excited to share my story with everyone here. My name is Jeremy Lee. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Cision Vision. So I started the company together with my professor at MIT, Dr. Angela Belcher, who was the former head of bioengineering at MIT. So the foundational technology that we invented at MIT is using shortwave infrared light, which is this wavelength range between 1,000 nanometer and 2,000 nanometer, which has traditionally not been used for biomedical applications. So we're the only medical company specialized in this wavelength range. And what we found out is that there are actually a lot of anatomical structures you can see with this wavelength range. And then with our patented technology, we have our first commercial product with now 2 generations of product with paying customers across the US and Europe and Middle East as well. And then now we also have been funded by ARPA-H, one of the biggest initiatives that the U.S. government is taking on, and we're the only private company to have won the ARPA-H award together with the top universities. Now we're moving this technology from the first to its second generation, I should say second market, which is in surgery. So the first product is in pathology. Now we're moving into surgery, working with Johns Hopkins, Stanford, MIT, Notre Dame, and North Shore, also Endeavor Health in Chicago. So it's been a fascinating journey that I've gone on, and then I feel like as a scientist founder, I do see I do feel like I learned a lot, and then to be happy to share my experience, and then hopefully it'll be helpful to everybody here.
Great. No, thanks a lot. And I think it's very exciting, kind of the trajectory that the company has been kind of going on. But maybe we'll just take a few steps back and just kind of think about kind of a little bit more about you and kind of your personal journey, and entrepreneurship. Is this something that you're born with? Is this something that you learned? Is this something that you from the beginning of your graduate school wanted to actually do, or is this something that kind of gradually developed?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I think deep in my mind, when I was growing up, I had an idea of potentially becoming an entrepreneur, because I realized I have a lot of qualities that are compatible with entrepreneurship and not really compatible with just regular corporate jobs. And then, for example, I think generally I'm creative, and then also I am I like to seek the truth about a lot of things, and then when it's not consistent, or say when it's not compatible with the system, then I start to question the system. And then so I feel like I always had this seed in me. And also I had one thing that I'll say, which is kind of unique for scientists, is I'm also a hustler. So I'm not afraid to try new things and then to really lower myself to say, it's not about being a PhD, it's not about being a postdoc from MIT, it's about, just whatever business goal that we want to make, and then whatever it takes, I'll make a way, I'll figure out a way to do it. So I remember when I was even growing up, I had, the ideas I wanted to try. I will actually just go and buy glassware, do experiment in my bedroom when I was a kid. And then I really enjoyed that part. And also, I should say, when I was a PhD student, I had my first encounter with innovation. So I invented another technology, which is a analytical chemistry tool. So the idea is that we know that FTIR, which is this analytical chemistry tool to analyze molecules based on this natural absorption in the mid-infrared range. And then for the longest time, in mid-infrared imaging has not been very useful because the spectral resolution for FTIR is too low because of the diffraction limit. And then I actually worked with my advisor at University of Notre Dame, Greg Hartland, and invented a new technology basically using visible light to probe this thermal expansion change that is pumped by mid-infrared light. And then so by doing that, we actually improve the resolution of mid-infrared imaging by 10 times. And then that technology was later licensed by Bruker, and then they actually started the subsidiary company based on that. So when I was a PhD student, I actually went to conferences not only to present, but also to talk to the salespeople and say, hey, I have an exciting technology here, and then believe this will fit into your portfolio for Bruker, for other microscope companies. So I actually pitched to them before, and then later on, I pitched to the CEO of this subsidiary of Bruker, and then taught the CTO how to do these experiments. So I thought that was a very cool experience. And then I think the coolest part is that it's a completely different perspective. So you have to figure out how your research correlates to what they're doing, and then try to switch to their perspective and tell them that why this is important. I know we write manuscript in the first introduction part, we always come up with something like that, but I realize when you actually talk to a salesperson from an instrument company, it's a completely different story. You really have to do a lot of research on the market side to be able to communicate with them. So I'd say that that experience taught me that it's really fascinating. I would say it's very inspiring to see that an inception of an idea that my advisor and I had in grad school. Now it's it was licensed, and now it's serving labs around the world. So that inspired me to say, well, maybe I can do more. Maybe I can be in the front row seat as a CEO to lead this innovation, which again is another completely different story. But overall, I would say, for me, it's making a big impact. And I realize, I tell my friends, one of the reasons why I do entrepreneurship is I want to explain to my wife what I do. Because when I was in grad school, I tell her my project, and she just like, what? You spend all day just doing this, like, nanoparticles, single nanoparticles, and then that's all you spend your time with. And then so I realize now I can talk to my wife and say, hey, I went to these many hospitals, and then they're happy with it. We're helping patients. So I feel like that part really is resonating with me strongly. Yeah, so it's been a great journey.
Yeah, cool. And I think that the last bit that you just mentioned there, I think that that translation element, I think for a lot of people is much easier to kind of describe to whether it's family or friends, that ability of taking whatever complex research that you're doing and essentially finding a use case and figuring out how to kind of translate that. That's pretty cool. And I think maybe we can just spend a few minutes just maybe talking a little bit about kind of the technology and how you kind of identified it. I think, there's kind of an interesting story kind of, I guess, behind that in terms of serendipity. And I guess maybe just for all of us to kind of keep our eyes open for interesting opportunities. And I think, your story definitely has elements of that. I don't know if you want to share that with us.
Yeah. So I do see that it's actually by serendipity that I it started as a discovery, so the invention story. So yeah, I was when I started at MIT as a postdoc. So I worked at the Koch Institute for Integrated Cancer Research. So the cool thing about the Koch Institute is that it actually invites practicing surgeons, practicing physicians to do research side by side with us. So we get to see how they operate, and then we work with them on interesting projects that will be easily translatable. And then one project I was working on was working with Mass General Hospital, also in Boston, on a vaccine project. So they were working on, I should say, adjuvant, which is the part in the vaccine that make it much more potent. They invented a new adjuvant, which is this thing to basically turbocharge the vaccine. And then so they asked us imaging scientists a question. So how can you see lymphatic response or say immune response, because the antibodies for vaccines are made in the lymph nodes. How can you see that in vivo without killing batches of mice? Because that was the only way that they can see any kind of longitudinal study to track the immune response. So I started investigating this topic, and then so prior to that, I did not know much about the lymphatic system, and I realized the lymphatic system is kind of a mystery to the scientific and clinical community overall. It's much less studied compared to the vascular system, and I got to appreciate how difficult it is because it is translucent. It is also it flows very slowly. So all the imaging methods for tracking speed would, or say making use of the speed difference between blood flow versus anything static, it would not work for lymphatics. So I started trying all kinds of different technologies, such as ultrasound, ICG, fluorescence imaging, and they worked, and then we were making progress on the project. But I was like, wow, this is so interesting that nature just gave us this topic of how do you imaging lymphatics, and it's difficult. And it was actually after almost 8 months of just trying back and forth all these technologies and got like okay response, but not great, more just repurposing what people use for vascular. All of a sudden, I was working with a collaborator, and then he was again having difficulties looking for lymph nodes when he was dissecting the mouse. And then just coincidentally, he was doing it on an imaging stage that I set up for something else. So the camera was looking at that imaging stage, and I took a look at the screen, which I forgot to turn off, and it was showing a contrast between lymph nodes and fat. And at that point, I was like screaming in the room because for me, as I mentioned, when I was a PhD student, I worked on microscopy, and it's so difficult to get any type of signal to noise without very intensive optimization. But even with just no optimization, I observed a contrast. And then so I know that this is Mother Nature at work, and then, or to translate it to scientific language, is that it's very high signal to noise level. So then I started investigating, why am I seeing this contrast? At that point, I didn't know why, but it was very repeatable, so that using this shortwave infrared light, I was consistently getting natural contrast based on reflection out of lymph nodes. And then it took me another few months to finally identify the reason. It was actually a very simple. So we were looking at the water content between lymphatics and the surrounding fat. And then lymphatics is really high in water, and the surrounding fat is really low in water. And shortwave infrared has a big absorption for water peak. So you get this natural contrast, very high signal to noise, completely real time. And then it also uses really regular glass optics, so you can integrate that into the current optical imaging instruments. So that's why I kind of had this origin story, which is this, at that point, I realized I invented a very shiny hammer. I know I'm onto something very, very interesting, but I did not know how to use it. Because at that point, I was like, okay, maybe I can help other researchers find lymph nodes. How many researchers would actually buy this instrument? And then just by talking to a few, it seems like there are very few of them. Then I was just like, okay, where can I use this technology, which I think Munya, to your point earlier, is that I feel like for us scientists, it's actually relatively common for us to, invent something new, and then we would be thinking, okay, how can we find a market for it? How can we turn this technology into a business? So I do see that that is actually the bigger hurdle that we have to overcome to actually have a startup, to have a business, and then to have the product market fit in the future.
No, thanks. And I guess maybe you guys kind of continue with the journey. I guess, now that you've kind of identified this, I guess, concept, can talk to us a little bit about, some of the things that you had to do, kind of moving from concept, maybe to prototype, to speaking to some of your early customers. But I think a lot of value is had by speaking to early customers, but really trying to bridge that gap between your concept and giving early customers something that they can actually work with and give you feedback on. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yes, of course. So I'd say that's actually the thing that I was, again, by serendipity, extremely lucky to have met my closest mentor, Jay Stein, the founder of Hologic. And so it was through the MIT alumni network. And then, so I still remember our first meeting. I was telling my wife, oh my God, I'm meeting a medtech legend. He's going to give me all the secret sauce, and I know how to build the next big medtech company. And then in the conversation, I was just so impressed by the fact that I was talking to him, but then tell me anything that was just like any techniques of how to do fundraise, how do you pitch, and then how do you refine the business proposal, and then none of that. He just told me one thing. He said, go talk to your customers, and then they'll teach you a lot more than what I can teach you. And then that was such a amazing idea. And then it was kind of an epiphany moment, because prior to that, I participated in the National Science Foundation I-Corps program, which pushed us to do 100 interviews with physicians. Well, for us, potential customers, so for us, they're physicians. And that was already a very, very rewarding learning experience. But by talking to him, that was an epiphany moment, because I realized, for one, just through that 100 interviews with customers, my initial hypotheses were actually completely thrown out of the window. They were completely wrong. What I learned is that after 100 interviews, you start to see a pattern of which group of customers, which segment, they have a shared pain point. They have shared complaints about what they're doing, and they actually strongly believe that what you're doing can potentially help them. And then so that pattern was so important, and I don't see any other way to learn that experience other than to talk to them directly. And then I realized it is completely true that no matter how experienced this one single person is, either in entrepreneurship, medtech, or even clinicians, one person is one person, and then they're not going to be able to give you this pattern of pain points, and then this need that only comes out after repeated interviews with them. So I would say at this point we have won many industry awards, for example, Time Best Invention of the Year, Red Dot, and then. But I would say the biggest badge of honor that I wear is that I have personally talked to more than 2,000 physicians. And I think that learning that I had was extremely helpful for us to really keep on track, to be on track for, getting closer and closer to meeting the actual need. Because I think in startups, there are a lot of noise. For example, everybody's talking about fundraising, and everybody's talking about, how do you build your personal brand, and then company brand, and then, how do you build a hype, and then how do you pitch? And I think that's actually all compared to what I mentioned just now. I think everything else is secondary, because if we start from the first principle thinking perspective, what is a business? A business is a entity that can provide a service or a product to your customers, and then you can do it with a profit, and then and that, I feel like that is it. And then with the profit, that means you're delivering real value. So I feel like for us entrepreneurs, we want to be super laser focused on whether we're getting closer and closer to that end goal. and then not to be distracted by other excitements and then other metrics that people use as proxies for progress. So I feel like it is very easy to get distracted from the real goal that we're trying to achieve.
Cool. And I think, kind of listening to kind of what you've been saying, I think I wonder if, as scientists, we kind of have this nice training that kind of does allow us to maybe ask some of these hypotheses, ask these, really focused questions in a kind of entrepreneurial setting. And I'm just kind of wondering, if, your thoughts of kind of as scientists, if our training potentially gives us a little bit of that edge that potentially entrepreneurship does require.
Yeah, so that's a very interesting point. So I would say, because as I was thinking about this conversation, I realized the after inventing this, shiny hammer, let's say, and then finding nails was so difficult, and it took so much work. But I would say the biggest enemy that we're fighting against is ego. So when I say ego, I feel like the first layer is our own ego. So I think actually most scientists, I would say, we come with bigger egos, because we know we're relatively smart compared to average population, and then we've been in this ivory tower for a long time, so we didn't have to talk to average people nearly as much. So actually, there's before I get into the advantage of being a scientist, I think there's a big challenge of being a scientist is that we have to fight our own ego to say, okay, I'm talking to this customer. He or she might not be as educated as I am. He or she might not be, as in a social status might be actually lower in a chain, that they are just like having a regular 9 to 5 job trying to get by. And then how do we actually still have the empathy and then try to fight all these these labels that the society put on all of us, to really put ourselves into their shoes, no matter what their background is, to really have the empathy to say, oh wow, I feel your pain, and then this is a real pain, or I feel that you don't feel like this is a pain, and then you're telling me real information that I should not pursue this particular market. So I think to be able to fight our own egos, to say, I no matter what this person is coming from, as long as he or she is qualified as a customer of my potential market, I need to have the empathy. And then the second layer for the ego is you will encounter a lot of people who then themselves have big egos. Especially I feel like in medicine, some physicians have egos, a lot of entrepreneurs have egos, and then for us, young entrepreneurs, scientist entrepreneurs, a lot of people will just dismiss you as, oh, you're a nerd, you're a technical guy, you don't know what business is, and then you're doomed to fail. Like of the technical founders, they just they don't know how difficult this product market fit is. So I feel like for us, we have to again not feel judged and be able to tell ourselves the right thing and say, it is probably true in that moment that that person knows a lot more on that topic than you. But then I think now getting to the advantage of being a scientist, that we are by default smart, that we can learn. And then so if you put down your own ego and say, like maybe I don't know how to, establish a CRM, how to, have to build a website and then to speak to your audience. And then maybe that person who judged me actually knows more, but then I'm willing to learn. And then, and I'm not going to be discouraged by this person judging me. And I know that in a few weeks and months, and then I might be better at this compared to this person, just because, for scientists, we are used to learning new things, and then we're used to learning new topics from scratch by doing a lot of research, where we are very proactive learners. So I would say in retrospect, I do feel like scientists have has a huge advantage, because I feel like we are equipped with this methodology of learning. And we are not afraid of any topic, right? Because then you just tell me a new topic, I'm training imaging, optical imaging. Now we're looking at ultrasound. And then I've no experience in that before, but I have the methodology. I know how to learn it from scratch. And then so I feel like that is shared with within the scientific community. But then, for a business person, it's impossible for them to just say, okay, now let me try to learn exactly how, you establish an optical system and try to build the intuition of, what kind of lenses, focal length, working distance, all that kind of stuff. So it's impossible for them to learn it the other way. So I would say for scientists, we do have a huge advantage by having more possibilities. But then we are starting with a potentially a bigger ego and then a less experience with communication, and how do we, and also working in bigger groups and then collaborating in bigger groups. So those things I would say they are very learnable, and then we have the methodology to learn it. But then we have to acknowledge that usually by default we start with the lower we start behind compared to the rest of the population when it comes to entrepreneurship.
Oh, no, thanks. And I guess maybe now we can kind of talk about kind of the leap, I guess, into actually starting the company. And I think you kind of alluded a little bit to, being able to chat with mentors and, asking things about, funding. You mentioned at the beginning that, you have a co-founder. How did that kind of relationship come about? Of course, so your supervisor, but, becoming a co-founder, how did that, essentially, what are some of the lessons there? And I think there's a lot of people who do say that having a co-founder is probably the best thing to do when you're starting a company. And I think just kind of hearing kind of your thoughts on that as well.
Yeah. So I co-founded the company with my professor, Dr. Belcher at MIT, and then she is not going to be able to leave her job at MIT to join our company. So she has been extremely helpful in terms of with scientific research, and then also opening doors for us through her network. But then overall, the day-to-day operation, I've been working on it mostly by myself, and then explored having co-founders in the beginning. And then, so I'd say I also talk to many founders, and then the idea of, in the day-to-day operation side, having co-founders, the opinions are split. So some people, I know, for example, Y Combinator, they ask people to have co-founders. They don't fund solo founder companies. But then I've read a lot of articles saying that solo founders are much more effective because then you get to be much more efficient, and then to make decisions quickly. And so I would say I don't have the other perspective in terms of having a successful co-founder experience on the day-to-day operation side. We do see successes around us, but I can comment on the advantage of being a solo founder, because I think number one is that, as I mentioned, you get to be a lot more efficient. You just say, because startup is all about speed and how can you make the most amount of progress in a short period of time. Then being what they say, I saw this quote, the benevolent dictator. So you actually, you hear everybody's opinion, you actually be very open-minded to listening. But then if we make a decision, then there's no democracy in terms of you take a vote, I take a vote. It's just we decide as a team, and then it's mostly the founder's decision. So I do see that on the efficiency side is very helpful. And then I think actually it goes deeper than this binary choice co-founder or solo founder, is that I feel like most people, when they're starting, they just feel like it's so daunting. It's so intimidating of a process. So how I wish there's someone there to, do it together with me. So I think it's more just this feeling of insecurity, or say this deeper fear to say, oh, it's such a daunting journey. If there's someone to be there together with me, it'll be better. And then so conceptually, I feel like that's what people are talking about. But I realize many people, this part I know is true, is that people say being co-founders are basically, day-to-day operation co-founders are more serious than getting married, because if your company is successful, you end up spending more time with your co-founder than your spouse. And that is definitely true. So I feel like, there is a big gap between this insecurity of how I wish someone is there to help me a little bit versus I'm committing to this relationship, which is more serious, or say I'm committed to spending more time to this person or this group of people who I'm going to spend more time than when with my spouse. So I realize most people, most founders in the early phase, they didn't realize the second part, didn't realize how serious this commitment is. And then they usually have a fallout early in the process, or it becomes much uglier when it's actually later on. So I would say I'd say I think it's okay to explore. I think it's definitely good to explore whether you can find someone who can do it with you. But I see that just be mentally prepared that you have to have the mindset to say, if we're incorporating the company, if this person is called a co-founder, then we're committing to this potentially lifelong relationship, and then I'm spending so much more time than my personal relationship with this person. But then the last point that I wanted to add to this is that I don't feel like finding a co-founder is the cure to this deeper insecurity of, oh my God, it's so intimidating. This is such a daunting process. So I'll share one quote that another founder told me is that you will be surprised how much you can achieve if you really care. And then so that was such an important quote to me, is that I realized throughout this journey as a solo founder on the operation side is from I usually what I the kind of cycle that I went through is that when I see an opportunity, for example, there's a conference coming up, can I be an exhibitor, and then can I have a prototype there? So maybe I'll have 30% confidence I can do it, but then I just chose to say, let's go, we'll just go ahead and do it. And then about 50% of the way, then I realized, oh wow, this is so overwhelming. Now I have people kind of interested, but then the engineering is not quickly enough, it's not smooth enough, and then now investors are interested, but then maybe some of them are not ready to commit, and I'm learning new things about these things, and it's so intimidating. I feel so overwhelmed. So I think actually in retrospect, that actually those are the important moments where you can learn. You just say, oh wow, I have this, I'm feeling overwhelmed because now I'm endowed with much more opportunities than I was prepared for. So being overwhelmed is actually a good sign that now there are a lot more opportunities than I expected. So then I feel overwhelmed, then I kind of have this period of of anxiety, and then 60-70% of the way, then enough people believe in it, then I feel a level of responsibility to get it through. And then when I hit 100% for this particular project, and then in retrospect, I was like, oh my God, I couldn't believe that I actually did it. And then it was just this, this project seemed so intimidating to me before. But I think overall, that's kind of like the cycle that I went through over and over again. And then I'll say it's great to explore. Maybe you can find a great co-founder, and just it is very difficult. It is a big commitment. But then I'll say the cure to that fear of, or say or that insecurity for this daunting journey, the cure is not to try to say how I wish I have someone to help me, but to really try to say, if I care enough, I think I can do it, and then I can inspire enough people to help me. But then I'm not gonna try to just resort to a person to offload something that I am afraid of. So that is not the cure to that problem.
Cool. No, no, thanks. And I think I can take a little bit of parallels from kind of what you're saying with kind of what I'm doing here. I think many people who would know me, I think they'll think that I'm a very introverted person and someone who's very shy. And I think when this opportunity did come, I think I probably had that element of can I be involved in something like this that's so public. And I think like you say, I think once you get into it, you really do kind of feel like, oh, this is great learning. And I think that's something that I think we can all kind of all learn from.
Yeah,
I
thank you
think we
so
have probably
much.
about another, yeah, we
No,
have
no,
another
I
about five
wanted
minutes.
to. Yeah, I echo on that just really quick because I think if you look at all the successful interviewers and then a lot of podcasters or a lot of the influencers online, the great ones are actually big introverts. So they are much more. They're actually much more. They know what they want a lot more. They're more sensitive, and then they're more sincere, and then they can they can become more authentic. And I feel like the successful ones are actually the biggest, I think the biggest secret sauce to their success a lot of time is their sincerity. So I feel like you're doing a great job. And then, yeah, I think you have the recipe for success at this as well.
Great. No, thanks a lot. And I think just maybe to kind of continue this journey. So I think you've kind of spoken a little bit about running the day to day, but I think having an advisory team and a team is important as well. And I think just looking kind of at your advisory team, that looks like a very stellar group of people. And I'm just kind of wondering, how did you manage to kind of assemble such a team and kind of the steps that you went about doing it? Do you think that getting an advisory team first, maybe before you start building out a team that runs the day to day, is important, or kind of your thoughts there?
Yeah, thank you very much. So I would say, yeah, over time, because I would say when I started the company, I immediately realized, oh, it's not about me anymore. It's not about me having this ambition. It's not about me liking this lifestyle. It's about how I can, assemble a team who, and then really go after the business opportunity and then inspire the customers and then find this product market fit. So so the moment that I realized I need to have a team, I started asking myself this question because I realized on one side, we cannot compromise the quality of work. We have to have 10 times better product and services or whatever you provide compared to big companies, because otherwise, we don't have the brand, we are scrappy, and then so by default, you have to be 10 times better. But then if you're 10 times better in a short, and then you have to do it fast, so you have to work with the best people. Like you have to work with people who are the best at their crafts. But then when I look at, I'm in Silicon Valley, look at the big companies around me, the big techs, they pay, and then their compensation package is astronomical compared to what startups can pay. I started asking myself this question: how can the right people who are best at their crafts but still choose to believe in this thing that we're doing? And then so I feel like, I have to again tap into the empathy part, is just to say, uh, if we focus on the material side, it doesn't make sense. It's just never going to make sense. No matter how big of a pie, stock option, everything you give them, it's just not going to be attractive enough, because most people know early stage companies, the stock is just, a piece of paper, and then more than likely it's not going to mean anything. So that's not the point. Then I feel like for the advisors and the team members, I feel like there are two a little bit different approach. So for the team members who are actually making day-to-day contributions to the team, so one thing that I realize is that when there are there is a group of people who are best of their crafts, but they feel like in a big company they're not respected, they're not admired and appreciated enough. They feel like they only improve, let's say, Google search result by 0.5% or 1%, and they call it a big success, and then they don't feel like that's inspiring enough, and they only get to do a very small piece of that whole project. So I feel like there are people who are looking for opportunities to say, although I'm already super good at what I do, but I'm looking for the right environment where I can grow as well. I can, have new responsibilities that I didn't know, that I won't be able to have in a bigger organization. So that will help me grow into another stage of my career. And then they also feel like, okay, now I have the autonomy to be able to say, hey, I started this project, and then now, through this company, it is a commercial success, or it is an award-winning product, and then that is something that I'll be able to tell my future employers or anyone that how I had this very inspiring process. I started from nothing, a concept, now it's a tangible impact that I made. So I realized that is the group of people that I wanted to work with. And then what I can offer them is trust and autonomy, and also to say, this is an opportunity for you to grow. And then so the cash part, the stock option part, we will try to beat market, and then we'll try to make it make sense to you. But then that is, I've consistently found that no one is just to say they joined because they're doing this backwards calculation to say how big is the exit, and then and what percentage, and then what does that mean in a couple of years. And then so I think people who are laser focused on that will just not have the right intention in this organization, because you have to trust them. In an early stage startup, it's all hands on deck. You have to trust their judgment. You can if someone is only focusing on the material side, then their judgment is compromised, and not bringing 100% themselves to their creativity, their work ethic, to the whole picture. So I think I've been very fortunate that I've been able to find find these people who are scattered around the world, actually. And I think COVID actually did us a favor. Now everybody is treating remote work more seriously, and it opened up a talent pool that was just not accessible before. And then so about the advisors, so now if we have empathy for what they're interested in, so I realize so they don't need the autonomy, right? And they have the respect from big organizations. They achieved all that already. And then as I realized, when the established entrepreneurs, when the advisors, when they get to a certain level, the first thing they're looking for is, if there's a young entrepreneur and they see themselves in they see themselves, the younger version of themselves, at least a portion of that, and then they feel like, oh wow, I want to help this person. And then I'll say, being able to feel that like my help is appreciated, and that turned into impact, it turned into something that is rewarding psychologically to them. I think for advisors, that's probably the number one the thing that they can get from these relationships. So they have economic economic success. They don't care about the at least those not the top reason for why they will be in this relationship. So I'd say that's the number one thing that I see they can benefit from this relationship. And then the second one I would say is that when they have this relationship, well, I guess it's related to the first one, is that once you make progress because of their advice, and then they feel like it is something that, oh wow, I see that my advice is making impact. And the last thing I say is that I do feel like, as a leader for the organization, but I do feel like I have to earn it every single day. So I think I have to earn it from my employees. I have to earn it from my advisors. So a lot of the advisors, some of them I met through the MIT Alumni Network, but then some of them I actually just cold emailed them. I said, I've been following you. You have such an amazing journey, and I listened to your podcast, and I know from your podcast, I think you are the type of person I'm looking for. And then so they just responded positively, and then we have a great relationship. So I'll say, but I know at that point, when I cold emailed them, I know I have something to offer. For example, at that point, we were having strategic discussions with big companies, and I say, I trust your judgment based on your experience more than anyone else. So therefore, I'm code messaging you, and then wanted to bring you on the team. And I believe your skills and your experience will be deeply appreciated with the opportunities that we have right now. So again, I feel like we can't take anyone for granted on the team. I would say I have to earn it every single day for me to be the leader for the company, and then for me to make it worthwhile for everybody on the team.
Cool. No, thanks. I think time is flying. I'm really enjoying this conversation, and I have several more questions. But I think not to be selfish, I think I'm going to open up the floor to anyone who may have some questions for Jeremy. if you want, you can let me know. Otherwise, I know we can just continue talking.
Yeah, great. So I guess if anyone has any questions, I'll be happy to address them. And maybe there's the raising hand function from Zoom, I believe.
No, it doesn't look like there's anything that's kind of popping up. Maybe I'll just take this moment to just also ask another question. Or Paul.
I, this is so wonderful to hear a personal journey. I thank you for that. Could I ask a difficult question, please, that's
Yes.
in lots of people's minds because they fear being an entrepreneur because of what they may expose themselves to? So could you give us an example of a mistake that you've made that you would have done differently if you'd have been able to have certain skills or certain information? Can you give an example, or has everything always worked out for you?
No, I made plenty of mistakes. And then so I would say for the number one layer is that I feel like I always say whenever I hear any compliments for what I've been doing, I tell everybody that I'm an apprentice of Jay Stein because he really set the good foundation to keep me make sure that I have my eyes on the prize, which is this final product market fit. And then I would say so on for the mistakes that we make on the product side, I would say one thing that I realize is for at least for us, when we're building products, a lot of I saw there are a lot of engineering firms that can provide service to say, I should say this is a learning experience about a contractor relationship. So, as early startups, we can't afford many employees, so we have to work with contractors. And then, so there are a lot of contractor firms that can provide services to you. You develop a scope of work initially, and then you start working with them. And then they deliver the milestones and then deliverables. So that is the norm for a lot of product development cycles. So I tried that with one of the projects that we had, and then it disastrous. And then the reason for that I later realized is that contractors, if we just approach these relationships as a regular contractor relationship, then we are actually our interests are not aligned because for startups, our milestones, our scope of work change so much so quickly. Then for contractors, if they're approaching it in a conventional way, then they only care about what is agreed upon, and then I want to get paid by this day for this milestone, this deliverable. So that was a mistake that I learned is that I had to, we actually spent an entire year on a project. And then the moment that I showed that product to the physicians, and they were like, there's no way I'm going to use this in what we wanted to do. And then, so it took much longer. The outcome was not usable. And then now I should say the learning that I had is that even for any contractor relationship, I always tell them the full picture of the company. I don't start with the scope of work. I say, this is an exciting opportunity. We're working on something that is going to change the world. And then, we have this team. This is a startup from MIT. We're now working with Stanford Hopkins. I tell all of them this. And I say, if this goes well, I'm open to offering you stock options and for you to share the success that we'll have. And then, so I always treat them as teammates. I say, contractor, employee, whatever the paper says is separate. So but what I want from you as a teammate is to really be able to think in our shoes and then and listen to the customers, and then we will adapt as we go. And then I trust you will be reasonable. You trust I will be reasonable. And then I want this person's commitment to this project, not just to the milestones and deliverables and scope of work. So now I think that was a very helpful process for me. So we do have contractors who have been working with us for years now, and then so we still have contractor relationships, and they always prioritize our projects because they believe in our mission.
That's really well said. It also aligns with my experience, so it's good not to feel alone. Thank you very much.
Yeah, of course. Thank you.
Great. Thanks for that wonderful, wonderful question. I don't know if there's anyone else who's has a question, and if you're happy to, you can also just share your screen as you ask the question. Jing Jing.
Hi, thank you. Thank you, Jeremy. It's very, very nice, very inspiring conversation. And I have a very quick question. As you mentioned, that you have a 100 people survey at the very beginning of your journey. So how do you find them and how design your questions?
Yes, yes. Thank you so much for that question. So I participated in the National Science Foundation I-Corps program. So actually, this is a program that anyone can, well, anyone in the US, I should say, can participate. And they have different cohorts, Boston, Atlanta, San Francisco. But I guess you don't have to participate in this program to embrace this methodology. And so they actually offered us $50,000 as budget to travel and then to have ideally in-person meetings. We did it remotely because COVID just started at that point. But to answer your question, how do we find 100 interviewees? Was number one was through personal networks. So we had people who we found are like advisors, and then they know physicians, and they were trying to be resourceful. So I would say the most effective way was LinkedIn. So I still remember the days I messaged. Back then, I think there was no limit or much higher limit. So I'm like add 500 people on LinkedIn at once, and then just message them, and then try to have a list of what exactly they said, and then try to set up a meeting. And then, yeah, so I would say, again, that's where the hustler part of me doing is I don't mind doing those things. And then I feel like it's almost necessary because, this is routine tasks for salespeople, for people who are specialized in business development. So, if we're true to being entrepreneurs, then, this is something that we should learn and we should do. So yeah, so I also developed kind of a methodology to find people on LinkedIn. So you actually you can add them first, and then to send a message first, and then once you add them, then the conversation becomes easier. Once they approve, the conversation becomes easier. If you just approach them directly, it has much lower success rate. But then overall, the success rate is going to be below 5%. And then again, relevant to the earlier point that I made is that as entrepreneurs, then to rise above that challenge and that discouragement is kind of part of what we sign up for.
Great. Thanks. I think we have about 4 more minutes. If there's no other questions, maybe I can just kind of give Jeremy kind of like one final parting shot. Kind of, what is the kind of the most important message that you potentially want to share with anyone who's aspiring to be an entrepreneur?
Yeah, so for me, I feel like being an entrepreneur is number one is on our personal side, it's a lifestyle. It's not a I think there's a lot of it is overall being glorified that it's cool that you get all this hype. I think overall the real entrepreneurship lifestyle is a lot of pain, a lot of suffering, a lot of challenges to overcome. And then, what we present publicly, the rosy picture is not representative of the lifestyle that we have to go through. But then it is definitely a worthwhile experience if you feel like it is the right fit for you. So I would say I became a much more responsible person. I became a much more positive person. I became a much better husband and a better life partner for my wife. And then, so I feel like on one side, I feel like it's definitely worth it. It's not for everybody, but it just speeds up all the learning that you have to do in life because I had to step up to the challenge. On the other side, I feel like I also see some founders who make it too much about themselves. So they might just because I'm in San Francisco, in Silicon Valley, there's a big founder culture that people will just say, I want to be a founder. Maybe it's this technology, maybe it's that technology, maybe 3 months later it's a different technology, and then no matter what, I want to be a founder. So I feel like that is missing the bigger picture. So I think once you start, it's not about you. It's not. It shouldn't be about your personal ambition. It's not even about your learning. It's learning is a side effect, and then so it's all about the product market fit. It's about the customers.
Great. So I'm not sure if you're frozen, Jeremy. It does look like you might be frozen. But if you do join us, yeah, do feel free to complete that thought. But I think this probably takes us to the end of today's story. I think there's quite a lot of things to learn from Jeremy's story. And I thank you everyone for attending. And I'm sure we'll meet again on the next story. So everyone have a good rest of the day, wherever you're at.